founder of Something or Other Publishing, Wade Franson, is the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society, from messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted through our culture. Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Tonight's episode, Applying Spiritual Energy, with Nimrod Avraham.
And good morning and good evening, depending on where you are when this is being recorded and this is being aired. I'm your host, Wade Franson, Created in the Image of God show, the role of religion in society. And we have a very, very special guest today. And we're pre-recording because it's afternoon for this guest. He comes to us from Israel. Welcome, Nimrod. How are you this afternoon?
I'm great. Thank you. And thank you for having me, Wade.
And please share with the audience exactly where you're at in Israel.
So I live, I would say, 10 minutes walk from the Mediterranean by the coast of Tel Aviv. And it's a beautiful city. And we're rushing towards spring here, hopefully soon.
Well, our daughter was 18 months, I believe, and I have videos of this at exactly that spot when we took a trip to Israel. This must have now been 14 years ago, and we stayed in Tel Aviv and walked out to the Mediterranean from our hotel. So perhaps we crossed each other on the beach at that time.
Might happen.
So for our guests, tell us a little bit, are you personally safe? Have you had any issues or challenges? Obviously some warnings, but how have these last few months been for you in Israel?
They've been very, I would say, tough and also dense from an emotional perspective. Because you know, everywhere you go, there's somebody who is either been affected through his second circles or first circles. I don't know if you know, but the military service in Israel is obligatory. So with that being said, my daughter is now doing reserves. She just graduated from the army as a lieutenant, and she's been called back to do reserves. And I think she's doing an amazing job, especially on the humanitarian side. But with that being said, I wish we didn't have an army and there was no war.
Amen to that. So are there different options then for people in the military in Israel, or is it, for matters of conscience in the way that you serve, or how does that work?
So basically, when you are nearing the age 18, the IDF, calls you up and gives you all these kinds of tests, from psychometrics to physical tests, in order to evaluate what would be the best fit for you in the army. For myself, I trained as a pilot for a year. Never graduated the Air Force Academy, but was lucky enough to be in the Israeli Air Force and to serve there for 3 years and 10 years of reserve. And when I say 10 years of reserve, that last time I did it was 20 years ago. So I'm safe, and I wish for the future generations to grow in a world where no country needs any army. Many farmers, less fighters, because, if you read the prophets for the last 1,000 years of humanity, based on what is called the redemption days, is basically we're going to be living in a very peaceful world.
Every man under his own fig tree.
Exactly. And a sheep and a wolf. Yeah. And
so that's a immediate jump into the topic for today. We're so grateful that you're here, and I want to share as much as I can about your life and your work with our audience. So let's start with what we typically do on the Created in the Image of God show. We talk about your origin story. So go back into your history. tell us a little bit about your parents and where you were, how and where you were born, and the kind of society world situation you grew up in your very early years.
Gladly. So I grew in the neighborhoods of the big city called Tel Aviv, not far from a university called Bar Ilan. My parents both were, I would say, hardcore atheists. My dad, who passed away, was a Holocaust survivor. He was born in France, in Toulouse, in 1932, having his parents fled from Paris when the Nazis basically invaded Paris. And he made what is called an aliyah. It's basically he used the birthright to come to Israel as a Zionist when he was 16 years old. So when the state of Israel was basically announced by the UN, my dad came to Israel to build kibbutzes. You know, these are like these collective small villages where everybody share the work, and basically it's socialism at its best. And my mom, she grew up to an engineer as a single daughter, who actually fled from religions. He was raised in a very Orthodox Hungarian Jewish family, but he was more, I would say, curious about science, and he studied electrical engineering. I never knew him. He passed away when my mom was 20 years old, and she was a single daughter. So with that being said, they were both middle class, working in different jobs that for me as a kid seemed pretty cool. My dad worked for the Israeli airline called El Al, where he met my mom actually. And I grew up in a small neighborhood with lots of friends.
Let me just pause you there for a moment. I want to ask a deeper question then, for myself and for the audience, and that is that your father was an atheist. Your mother, similarly, was much more interested in science than religion, and they were founding members of the Jewish state then in the late 40s, early 50s, you might say. And at that time, there were kibbutzim, all around the nation of Israel. And these were small local cooperatives building this new nation. And how is it then, from a religious perspective, from Judaism, that the Jewish state had these strong socialist attitudes and perspectives built into its DNA right from the start? And to what degree was that true? Was it 20%, or was it completely pervasive throughout the entire country at the beginning?
So I'm not that knowledgeable about the early days of Israel in terms of demographics and beliefs and so on and so forth. But with that being said, I think that the majority of the early Israelis and the Zionists who came here, they were mainly secular. They came because of the idealism that was behind of let the Jews have their own state, which was called the Zionist movement back then. But obviously, many of their so-called reasonings were based on the ancient writings in the Bible and the right of Jews to live on the land that was called Israel. But I'm speaking from a very apolitical standpoint right now. First of all, I don't have enough knowledge to tell you what was the percentage of religious Jewish people in the early days of the Israeli nation, but I would say that majority were non-practicing Jews. So were my parents.
Well, and I guess what I was getting at too is that you mentioned the Hebrew scriptures, and these ideas of cooperative fairness, justice, equity, they are in those scriptures. The teachings are often misunderstood, I would say, because of some of the history that goes along with it, right? There's a lot of blood and gore in the Old Testament. There's a lot of discussion about God's interventions, whether it's in Noah and the flood and on up into the conquest of the Holy Land and these things. But the teachings that the people, the laws that the people were told to incorporate into their society, there was forgiveness of debt every 7 years, right? So that there was land ownership by the people, by all the families of the nation were vested in land ownership permanently throughout their generations, and this land was to return to the people every 50 years, so that even if a family fell into poverty for whatever reason and lost their land, it would be returned to that family in the year of Jubilee. And I think too, some may not know, I'm not familiar with history right at the moment.
Wait, if I may, sure. That's going straight from elementary school to high school, and I think that one of the things that I realized over time is that many people didn't graduate elementary school. And you know what I call elementary school? The 10 Commandments.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to ask me,
it's kindergarten, right? It's kindergarten. Do not do this. Do not touch that. Don't go there.
Yeah. Exactly. If you ask me, within the 10 Commandments, there's so much goodness in terms of how we should behave, or what is expected from us in terms of human behavior towards each other, with ourselves, with nature, and with our God. And I think that before you start applying other rules, you really need to embed and assimilate and understand the foundation of the 10 Commandments. Like how important it is not to kill, not to lie, to respect mother and father.
Yes.
Some say earth and father. And I think that, once everybody would tune into the commandments, we'll have a much easier run on this planet, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yes. So suffice to say, at this origin story part, let me just add in that since we're talking about your parents and the nation they came to and the nation you grew up in, I'll just throw out there that some people might be interested in looking into the origin of that song "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," written in 1939 for the Wizard of Oz. But it's an aspirational song by a Jewish person around the time of Hitler's Germany and the pending Holocaust. So here you are now. You're growing up in this young nation with atheist parents, in a nation that has religious roots in the sense of Zionist and what Zion represents. The city of David and the aspirations, the national aspirations for this people, the Jews. But it's largely secular. It's largely science based. You've got a lot of well-educated middle-class people who are now immigrants because of global cataclysm for their people, and now they're, whether they wanted to or not, many were almost forced to go and fulfill this ancient prophecy about reestablishing the state of Israel, right? So you've got these various swirling ideas going around between the people that are arriving over time. Is that a fair characterization as to the nation you grew up in?
No, because I was a kid. You're probably right, but from a kid's mind and from my own mind, I was looking to build my social life, and I was curious about the things that it was for me
You were a typical kid.
Exactly. We didn't have we didn't have cable TV back then, but we still get the Middle East television where I could watch Scooby-Doo and Fat Albert. And you know, when color TV came, I was young, and then we had like these great shows coming from the US. I remember, you know, seeing Transformers and Cybertron for the first time, and I was like almost looking at a miracle. And then reading the early books of, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, Gary Gygax. I was some kind of a nerdish kid, very fascinated by fantasy and science fiction, and was amazed by space technologies and aviation, and you know, growing up as an ordinary teenage, preparing myself towards the big moment for any kind of Israeli boy, which is, you know, recruiting to the army. And since I was very drawn into aviation, I always thought that, you know, the best thing in order for me to be the first Israeli astronaut would be to go through the Air Force. So I would say, yeah, I would say this was, you know, my childhood and teenage days, and then Army.
So tell us then a little bit about your coming of age and how that worked out, because you didn't end up being an astronaut.
No. Well, maybe I am, but I'm more of a psychonaut now. I'm an astronaut of my consciousness. Well, I actually was selected to train as a pilot, but I guess I wasn't a great aviator, so I never graduated. But I stayed in the Air Force, and then went on a tour of the world right after graduation, after 3 years during my military service, thinking inside the box as an athlete on, okay, what do I need to do now that I've traveled the world? I finished my military service. University. So I signed up to study behavioral science and communication for 3 years. Never graduated. Was very bored by going into classes. It was always with an entrepreneurial kind of spirit. Also finding myself flying as a flight attendant for the Israeli airliner for 2 years, just to see more of the world. Was a beautiful time. And then I decided to open my first business. A lot thanks to my father's French origins. I opened the cheese and wine shop and bistro, which was very popular back in 1997 in Tel Aviv, selling tons of cheeses and many liters of wine, and then feeling that, you know, the restaurant business in Israel, probably just like any other country, it has its glass ceiling. At least that's what I felt, and I needed more stimulators. So I sold my shares and started rolling myself in the world of, I would say, marketing and startups back in the early 2002.
Well, I just have to share, we watched the Super Bowl here yesterday, and there was an ad for some kind of app that you would get recommendations for gifts or purchases. And the situation was that France had given the Statue of Liberty to the United States. What should we give them in return? And this little boy says, well, the French like cheese. And so they gave them a cheese platter in return. It was kind of funny, I guess, if you're an American. But it sounds like you there's some truth to that little ad. And so you were successful with this. You had then the ability to continue your entrepreneurial work and into marketing. So tell us then about how, you know, some of the early experiences then with
Sure.
With what led to now that sign behind you about God's Gang, which we'll get to a little later.
My first job I would say in the early days of Startup Nation was basically launching a viral video agency. what is a viral video agency. And back in 2003, there was no YouTube, no user-generated content platforms. And people used to send like these AVI files with like these funny commercials, Budweiser, for example, to one another through email. And we basically reverse engineered how you create a viral commercial. And we established the first viral video agency in Israel. And we sold viral campaigns to advertisers. And the early age of trying to educate marketeers coming from, you know, corporate world about viral marketing was as itself, it was a challenge. And just the use of the word viral was a negative word for them. But you know, pretty fast after 2 years, every I would say director of marketing that wanted to impress his boss offered him to do a viral video campaign, and I think we were pretty successful in educating the market in its early days. While I was doing this, I was always with a dream to work for Disney. And there was a unique moment where an ex-Israeli sold his business, Fox Entertainment, to the Disney conglomerate, the Disney channels. And I'm talking about Chaim Saban and Fox Entertainment, Fox Kids in specific. And Disney bought 6,000 hours of, you know, his library, from The Amazing Spider-Man to Sonic the Hedgehog. But I would say the main reasoning was because of the Power Rangers. Saban held the right to the Power Rangers. Disney paid $5.2 billion. And I found myself selling my shares at the viral video agency and joining the newly, back then, launched Disney channel that was called Jetix. And for me, it was like the fruition of, you know, my existence, me coming from a sci-fi fantasy, having a TV in my room, and basically you're evaluated if the TV is turned off and you're not watching cartoon, you're not doing your job. So,
Yes.
So just imagine.
Yeah, I can imagine when I was in transition, I was teaching actually, and during the summer I got a job with Disney Interactive. So I also worked with Disney out in Burbank, and at Disney Interactive, I was debugging software, and I was doing this because I speak several languages, and they needed people to debug the software that was being localized in different languages, and so we were getting paid to sit there and play these video games all day and make sure that, you know, and they would give you the keys to work through the levels to make sure that the text and everything was functioning correctly. And because of speaking multiple languages, I actually caught a few bugs that had gotten through the original English, and because it was consistent across the languages, and I was the one that was able to tell them that. So that actually helped me then with my career in technology later. So we had a little bit in common. Anyway, go ahead. So, but the thing about Disney was they were a very tough company to work for. They were, you know.
I was young. I was energetic. I was very motivated to prove my creativity and to bring value, real value. Yep. And it was 2000, I would say 5, 6, early days of, you know, online presence in terms of video, of mobile content, of games that had the MMO, the mass multiplayer elements to them. And I came, you know, as I thought I'm the right person to bring Disney, especially Disney Israel back then, to, you know, to the digital age. And I was pretty successful on you know, I remember doing Wall Street, what is called screensavers and wallpapers and like different ringtones and based on Disney brands. And we were called. All the Disney Channel executives were invited actually to a Disney Channel summit in Orlando. And I remember how excited I was, and I flew with the managing director and the head of programming, and we met with other 120 Disney Channels executives. And they took us, you know, through the Disney way of giving you the right toolkits to be successful in your role. And we were going through different workshops and doing different exercises, you know, just to expand our ways to outperform in our roles. And after 2 days in Orlando, we boarded the Disney cruiser to the Bahamas. And Disney have a big ship. And I remember back then, Nickelodeon was becoming very strong and successful due to two brands that are still very known to kids and parents nowadays. One was, you know, a yellow sponge living underneath the water in a place called Bikini Bottom, and the other was this American Spanish-speaking great character with a monkey friend with red boots called Dora. And
I have a big poster picture up here of my daughter painted in I don't know, 3rd grade. A big right over here on the wall of evil Dora. Dora is looking very angry. Anyway, yes.
So I remember standing on stage in front of 120 Disney Channels executives, and you know, there were big signs, one team, one goal. And you know, I was very proud telling them that I have two great ideas. One was to fly the first kid to orbit. I wanted to fly a kid to space because I was following there was a competition called the X Prize by the grandson of Charles Lindbergh, I think, or the grandson of his, promising $10 million to the first private company that would fly to space 100 kilometers with suborbit 3 times in a row successfully. And I was following the race. I was following Richard Branson with Virgin, which is now Virgin Galactic, and the other companies that try to come up with their solutions. And I even corresponded with Virgin Galactic as a Disney marketeer, telling them, what are the chances that we'll be able to fly a first kid into orbit, let's say by this and that? Obviously, the idea wasn't very well accepted.
Yeah, too risky still. You know, you don't want to be the company that killed a kid in space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I had everything, you know, figured out. We're going to do a reality show in each country. We're going to call it The Right Kid, just like The Right Stuff. You know, the movie I saw with James Gunn, early 1960 something, I think, or 1970. And well, I guess I needed to let this idea go. And I remember standing on stage and telling them, well, I have another idea. You know what? You just paid $5 billion, $5.2 billion, and I would say mainly for the brand called the Power Rangers. Make them interfaith. Why don't you make the Power Rangers, the fighting aliens? Why don't you make them an interfaith group? Show that, you know, a Muslim and a Jew and a Christian and a Hindu can basically save the world together. And much to my surprise, I had a full room of people clapping their hands for the idea and even auditioning. I need to remind that when I had this idea, I can reverse engineer it, but I was very atheist when I came on stage and offered to make the Power Rangers an interfaith group of superheroes. And Disney decided not to go with it. for their own reasons. And
there was some initial enthusiasm when the idea was presented, but it got killed in the boardroom.
I guess because of the sensitivities of trying to put different religions together. And I said, I watched how Disney are making billions of dollars on consumer products. And I said, okay, I can create a brand that would be an interfaith group of heroes back in 2007. And I called it God's Gang, just like the name that is written on the roll-up behind me. And I came up with these 4 cool characters because I said to myself, okay.
Well, let's hold it there, because we're going to go to a quick commercial break, in which, in this case, we're pre-recorded. I don't know exactly what it is going to be, but probably we're going to show a little video of God's Gang and come back and talk to it. And I want to encourage everyone to put their comments in the chat. Even though this is a pre-recorded show, there will be live elements when we actually air it. And as always, we'll be giving away some goodies to those whose comments are found to be the most entertaining, most informative, most engaging. So don't go anywhere. We're going to have a great little video of some kind here coming up in a second. And when we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about God's Gang. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Friendship and laughter and flying kicks. Only together the world we can fix. God's Gang for different things. And saving the day. Love from above. We may not agree on when to pray, but when we join hands, help us on the way. Crisscross is kind but never weak. He'll blow you away with his other turn sheet. Ninja has the power to analyze 18 ways to stop the bad guy. Taekwondo Hindu can hear the words of animals, insects, plants, and birds. Sumo Slim can spin a tail to capture our enemies without fail. Together we're better, we stand for each other, fighting for others, for now and forever.
Welcome back to Created in the Image of God. I am here with Nimrod from Israel. We'll talk about his name in a minute, but before the break, I had mentioned a painting that my daughter did, and I thought I would let everybody know. There she is, the famous, in the Franson household, Evil Dora. In case you're wondering, let me show you what we mean.
I'm going to have nightmares, Wade. I'm going to put garlic underneath my pillow.
The kids in my daughter's class got a kick out of the fact that she seems to be smiling, but there's something evil about here. But now let's move over to the God's Gang. You had a little painting you showed me there a minute ago, or a mock-up of them. Let's talk about God's Gang.
Let's talk about God's Gang. So, telling Disney how great it would be to make the Power Rangers an interfaith group and not having Disney execute it basically made me go and work on the first God's Gang universe back in 2007, where I created, I took all the things that I liked to see on TV, and I tried to work on very large common denominators between many peoples. And so I knew, if I want to be successful, martial arts, and because everybody loves martial arts. And if I combine it with their origin story, whether it's religion or culture, then immediately people would identify. So, I took very naive kind of basic decisions to come up with 4 characters representing 4 different religions, and with what I thought was evil back then. Not to say that not much has changed since, unfortunately. If you compare the pitch deck that we've created in 2007 and the pitch deck that was created in 2021, you would see that not much changed in the world in terms of how you define good from bad. So fast forward, and this is, I would say, an important part of our conversation. When I came up with the idea for God's Gang, I had zero belief. I was what you call sleeping on my nose in regard to belief, in regard to spiritualism. And now I can explain to myself what happened and what were the roads that I walked in the last 15 years in order to be ready to come up and bring the story of God's gang to the world. So 16 years ago, Disney didn't pursue the God's gang idea. I was in a sensitive period of my life. I had 2 daughters back then. Now I'm a father of 3 daughters. And I knew that my marriage is not going to be ending in a successful way. And I was offered to work for a publicly traded high-tech company, and I left the Disney channels. And I also got divorced. And 2 years.
What was the timing of this? I mean, that's a lot that happened. What was the total time of all those things happening for
2008 was the year that I got divorced. So we're talking about 16 years ago. And you know what? Maybe
the reason I asked
2006.
The reason I ask is that, you know, there are these tests where they put life events that are stressful and, you know, they give them a value. And when you get a certain number of them, you're supposed to get very sick because the stress is so immense. It sounds like it was a very troubling, tough time for you to go through.
Actually, I was very happy. When I wasn't happy in my marriage life. And basically breaking its attack. That was I didn't feel I was myself. Put me in a happy place, in some kind of even vanity maybe. You know, I can do on my own and I'm a free guy. But the universe has its way to teach us. And 2 years after I got divorced, the sun wasn't shining that bright for me, and I wasn't doing things that made me happy in terms of my career. I wasn't in a financial good place where I thought I would be, and even more, the building that I was living in was on fire, and I basically managed to be okay with having my entire apartment on the 3rd floor filling with smoke, being evacuated to the hospital. You know, you read in the paper when there's a fire about these who were inhaling smoke. So I basically inhaled the smokes that came from the fire. And when I was released from the hospital, I told myself, or I don't know if it was myself telling myself, maybe my higher self, now I can explain it. Go do something which is out of my day-to-day thing. And there's a praying in Judaism to thank God when you undergo this life-threatening situation and you basically get your life back. So I remembered 2 amazing things. One, that almost 300 meters, I don't, in feet, it's 500 feet away from my house, there was a synagogue, and a very modern synagogue, like it's called Reformic. And behind the curtain, there was a Torah book that was written by none other than my grandfather from my mom's side.
Wow.
Yeah, Goldstein. He was what you call in Judaism Sofer Stam. He was writing with his own hands Torah books. And I remember going to the rabbi there and telling him that I had a life-threatening situation and I want to say thank you. And I want to say thank you on the Torah book that was written by my grandfather, Goldstein. And he said, yeah, sure, come like Tuesday afternoon, bring friends, we'll take the book out, and you would say the blessings, the prayers, which is exactly what I did. And it was a very, I would say, exciting experience. Like I felt something that I didn't feel before. And it got even weirder. 2 hours after I gave the blessing and prayed, I got a phone call from my cousin, who for me is my dentist, Jordan Goldstein, telling me we must meet. Okay, well, I said I'm okay. I don't remember I have an appointment. He said, no, we must meet. Jordan, what's going on? And then he tells me a parallel story, which was for me in my awakening day, the day that my eyes were open. He told me that his father, who just passed away, Aryeh Goldstein, and him went to look for the grave, for the tombstone of the grandfather that was the Sofer Stam. And obviously, me as an atheist, and they knew my mom, she couldn't care less about religion, and she was even antagonized by, Judaism and the way that religion was practiced in Israel. They didn't even think of calling us to tell us, hey, we've been looking for the grave, and we, 3 days before the fire in the building, they made a list of who they're going to be sharing it with. Obviously, we were not on that list. And then Jordan tells me, you won't believe it. Sunday morning, we go to Jerusalem, to Mount Olive, to find the grave, and to learn that was the day that he passed away, which is basically the day of the fire. And then Jordan tells me I had a very strong urge to go and see what's going on with the Torah book. And he tells me I go to the synagogue on Tuesday, and I go to the rabbi, and I ask the rabbi to take the book out, to take the Torah book out. And the rabbi looks at me like I'm crazy, and he asks me, that's the Jordan side of the story. And he tells me, well, the book is out. Your cousin was here, and he took it out. I didn't have a chance to bring him back. And he said,
amazing.
What are you talking about? And the
my
rabbi
atheist cousin, you're crazy.
Yes, exactly. And then he told me some more stuff, which I will not share. That we speak.
Well, I have to say, what comes to my mind is there's a story in the Old Testament where the book of the law had been lost, and they went to find it to reestablish, proper worship, and because they had strayed away. I'm sorry, that's just the story that I was reminded of. This story is actually in the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures. Anyway, go ahead.
So, you follow science and you follow your beliefs for 36 years back then. And then you have this event in your lifetime where you have basically a very binary approach to it. Coincidence or no coincidence?
Well, and I'll share my perspective on this, and that is that this story that you're telling is not for me to believe or any of our other listeners to believe. It won't convince the skeptic, and that's not the point of it. That story is for you. I mean,
Absolutely.
you're sharing it, and we want to share it, but you're telling your story. It doesn't matter if 6 billion other people say that's just coincidence. Does not matter at all. You know the truth for you.
Absolutely agree with you. So just imagine I'm not in the best time of my life. I had this event happening to me in a very short period of time. Fire, hospital, going to give the blessing and the prayer, cousin calling me, and I felt like somebody came with a gong behind me and went like the vibration, basically. And I decided to act. I had an inner force inside of me telling me, you need to learn more, you need to know more, you need to know more, you need to know more. It's not a coincidence. And it hit me, and it registered
you
with
became you became a seeker at that moment.
Yes, I became a seeker. And with that being said, well, I say with that being said a lot. Sorry about that. The closest place for me to look for was Judaism. And obviously, I live in the land of the Israelis and the Jews. And a crazy thing happened to me. Like I was, speaking with religious people and trying to learn more, and I actually, good things started to happen in my life, like putting my career back, on track, startups, venture capital. And then one day, a rabbi walks into my office, a young guy, telling me, you are a young Jewish leader. We need to teach you Judaism. And I said to myself, I'm not that young. I don't see myself as a leader, but I do want to study Judaism. And he was a part of an organization called Eish HaTorah, the Fire of the Torah. And we had weekly meetings where I started understanding more and more. I can't say I'm very knowledgeable about Judaism. It's a very, I would say, expanded toolkit to practice a relationship with the Creator. But I started understanding more and more, and I found beautiful things within Judaism, but I also found things that weren't enough. I needed to learn more. Like, I needed to understand origin stories and different meanings about different stories within the Bible. And I went on this spiritual journey in trying to understand who was Enoch, Hanoch, whose name now you cannot say by Jewish people, the Meta and the Tetron. And
the tetragrammaton, right?
Yes.
The YHWH.
Yeah, and then I'm fascinated by sacred geometry. So the Merkaba, which is the multidimensional representation of what is called the Star of David, and the Sumerian script. And Zohar was the Zohar, the Kabbalah, the metaphysical aspects of Judaism and creation was very. I was very curious to know more. I had a real thirst for understanding who I am, why I am, how I can better with myself, how I can better with my surrounding, and I found many of the answers, I would say, within the spiritual realms. Even taking it, to higher places like molecules, like, studying what's the effect of psilocybin on my consciousness, or what is considered to be the spirit molecule called dimethyltryptamine, DMT. And I never did ayahuasca, but I've spoken and saw many people who did, and I also needed, to mitigate these very abstract ideas, some of the abstract ideas or some of the profound ideas with science. So if you have physics and you have metaphysics, and I would say that in between them you have quantum mechanics. The beautiful realm of quantum physics and quantum entanglement, which can explain many things that are coming from, I would say, spiritual studies and religious studies, and it's very hard to.
So let's unpack that real quick in scientific terms. But before we do, we're going to do one more quick break.
Yes.
And also to help keep these segments short enough to upload in for the airing later. So we're going to go to a quick commercial break. Once again, we will come back after this next segment and look at the comments and give away some goodies to the audience who are hopefully participating in the chat. So when we come back, we're going to dig into this, and we will get to God's gang and talk a little bit about the characters. And I can see already we're going to have you come back, because we haven't even talked about the schizophrenic nature of your name, right? We see Nimrod, but you have another name as well, which we'll reveal when we come back. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of Nimrod and God's gang.
Welcome to the Royal Falcon Foundation. Our curriculum and activities inspire and train adolescents through hands-on experiences, fostering growth and empowerment. Through immersive and challenging experiences, we shape young minds to think independently and develop their leadership skills. Our programs foster new friendships and unity, shaping young leaders to tackle real-world challenges with confidence. We believe in equipping the next generation with the skills to become leaders of tomorrow. Join us at the Royal Falcon Foundation and be part of a journey that empowers, unites, and inspires. Visit our website and embrace a world of possibilities today. RoyalFalconFoundation.com.
Welcome back to the Created in the Image of God show. Right before the break, we were hearing from our guest about physics, metaphysics, quantum mechanics. And so I wanted to just make this accessible immediately in terms of the physical world, and the fact that we are all kind of some kind of weird hologram or illusion, because we're actually energy. Unpack that for us. I know we talked about that in the pre-show meeting.
So I would try to explaining creation and creator and divinity requires a lot of humbleness, and even I would be apologetic trying to explain it, but I would try and do share my findings. Basically, I realized after, I would say, these many years of wonderful journey, that if I need to explain the essence of creation, creator, I would run an algorithm that would tell me what would be the two words that are most repeated all over, I would say, the ancient books and the scripts and the stories behind mankind and God. And it all comes down, I call them pillars. It all comes down to two pillars, which are very even simple to understand. The first pillar is the oneness. We all come from the same source, and we experience separation. We experience an egoic consciousness separation and forgetness. We forget our higher self to be a part of this holographic quantum universe. So one, and the one you can find everywhere. In Hebrew you say had, in Arabic you say wahad. The one, the law of one. We all separated, even in the Big Bang or in the first sentence of the Bible at the beginning, we all came from a one. Now, when you apply science to it, still the universe has been figured out by many scientists. The laws of, I would say, the universe by mankind can be defined by time, which is man-made, the form of matter by energy, which is the Einstein, energy equals mass times the speed of light square. So you can basically explain mass by energy. Gravitational waves, where you see the galaxies basically in the stars, getting into order. And quantum fluctuations, which are very prominent, in the existence of the universe, and the quantum entanglement. So basically, science cannot explain what is 95% of the universe that we live in, dark energy and dark matter, right? Only 5% can be somehow explained, and that's matter. But matter is energy and vibration, and when you study molecules and you go into the atoms and the subatoms and the godly particles that been found in Switzerland, then you understand that basically the matter that you're currently examining is made out of 99.9999999% empty space, which is why you said hologram. I would say holographic. So with that being said, it's energy, a unified field where we cannot feel it, though we can tap into it somehow. And when you try to understand how a machine, how an entanglement, how a collective would work best, you understand that you need to run some kind of current, some kind of energy into the energy. And excuse me for being cliched. I just shared with my friends today how the energy of love can be measured compared to the energy of hate. So to give a more simple question, the pillars for me are one, and that's why love is a must.
Well, let me share one of my own little coincidences. You shared the one where you and your cousin came to the same synagogue for the same scroll. I had written 2 books, my first 2 books, The People of the Sign, and the second one called The Hardness of the Heart. And I was having a writer's block completing this trilogy. And somehow I got it into my head that in order to break this writer's block, I would have to travel to Tibet and seek an audience for the Dalai Lama. Now, this is really strange because I had never given much credence, but it had to do with my own ideas about, I've traveled around the world from east to west. I lived in Alaska. I've been to South Africa. I'd been to the lowest point, the Dead Sea, and now I needed to get to the highest point. These were various coordinates that I felt I had to reach, and Tibet being symbolic of the highest point, right? And so I was and I had that young daughter, this new baby, and a wife, and it's like, to think that I would now go on this trip to Tibet was crazy, insane. But I somehow knew this had to happen. There's a point to this, so just stick with it. So I started putting that out there into the universe, and lo and behold, the Dalai Lama came to me because I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and the University of Madison, Wisconsin was doing studies with the Dalai Lama on brainwave energy. They were literally having him come to Madison to pray and meditate and study his brainwaves. So I then got to go and meet virtually, I mean in real life, but I didn't personally talk to him, but I went to hear him speak. And so he spoke to me live from the stage, and he answered certain questions that I had based on what he chose to talk about. And then I was able to write that 3rd volume. But it's interesting, they were studying his brain waves and his mental energy when he was entering into these states of meditation. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
It's a great story.
So you're talking about the love and hate and the different, energy and vibrations.
I only talk about love. Basically, the foundation of our Creator is, it's a one, which is all love. And in order to expand based on my Kabbalah studies, in order to continue the infinite expansion.
So would you then agree that
these universes and basically learn more?
would you then agree that, for example, there is the position that darkness does not really exist? It is the absence of light.
Mhm.
Hate, in that sense, does hate not exist? It's the absence of love.
Mhm. Absolutely. We live in a that one thing that basically I would say define the world that we live in is the duality. It's when you go, it's a game of dimensions, and this is where I don't want to go too deep into the understandings of my studies, but basically we're in a matrix, in a 3D holographic quantum universe, experiencing our life lessons, thinking you're Wade and I'm Nimrod, and we project each other.
Well, and by the way, let me digress. I promised the audience Nimrod is one of your names.
Yes. So
tell the story, because some of my audience knows who Nimrod was. He was the evil founder of the city of Bab El, the gate of God, and he was the builder of the tower to heaven, which God came down and said, this is confusion, and confused the languages. And so he is an anti-hero, right? Or a villain even.
Yeah. I grew up, my mom so-called thought it's a cool name for many like these young Israelis to be called Nimrod, because he was a hero. He started as a hero. He was a biblical hero, and he was very favored by God. But when my mom was supposed to take me to this Jewish ceremony on the 8th day, where they take a Jewish boy and perform this surgery on one of his organs, the guy that was supposed to perform the surgery said to my mom, well, I'm not gonna cut Nimrod. It's not a very good name. Can you please come up with another name? And her dad's name, the Hebrew name that my grandfather had, was none other than Avraham, Abraham, the one and only. So basically, I was raised and was given the name Nimrod, and then on the 8th day, I was joined with the name of Avraham.
Well, and I don't think the members of the audience who are even familiar with the Bible will know the story from the Quran and other writings, such as the Baha'i writings, about the contest between Avraham and Nimrod. So tell us,
Ibrahim and Namrud.
Yeah, so tell us what occurred according to the Quran and other writings that this story is not featured in the Bible. It's missing.
There's many stories there. Right. And there are many versions of, I would say, stories that try to explain the relationship between these yin and yangish kind of energies. And it also registers with the tree of life and with many other things that, I found in later stages in my life, which are also a part of the Hebrew alphabet, the codes. Well, it's hard. I mean, wait, try, I'm trying.
Well, even the word alphabet, right? Where does that come from?
Aleph Bet. It's yes. Basically, the ancient Hebrew letters, which are in the book of creation, considered to be the 32 engines of creating a universe. 22 letters and 10 numbers. And the 22 letters, each one of them has also a numeric representation. So it runs from 1 to 400. But I'll put it aside because this might even get many.
We will have you back confused. To go into depth on all of that. We'll have you back soon.
I'm not sure I'm the guy. You need more educated people. Okay. I'm trying to build my understanding based on the combination of many things that I've been engaged with. But there are people that can probably just give you the entire essence of Book of Creation, which is way beyond my capability to comprehend.
Fair enough.
Yeah, same as the Zohar and many other like these wonderful books. So Nimrod, hunter. Now, many of my Orthodox friends in Israel told me, "Well, you don't. It's not a regular hunter. You know how Nimrod hunted? With his words. It was a marketeer. And I grew up, my entire career.
So did that mean he hunted people and gathered people to him based on his words? And
Yes.
we're going to
Very
have
charismatic,
to.
very
We're going to have to.
charismatic.
So he was a charismatic demagogue in a way. We'll have to have you
Yes.
back, because the superpower you gave to the Muslim person in God's gang, which we're actually not going to. We're running out of time already. There's so much. We will have you back soon. But tell us about the superhero characteristic of the Muslim character in God's gang.
Muslim is one of my favorite characters. He's a good-hearted, kind, super strong, sumo-like, muscularly built Arab Muslim, and basically can tell great stories. And his stories basically are activating what is called theta waves, alpha waves on people, and it's like a Jedi mind trick. He plays.
So he's like Nimrod in that sense, in that he's foreboding, he's powerful, he's big, but he actually hunts them with his words.
He doesn't hunt them. He doesn't hunt. He more paralyzes them. So
interesting.
Basically, yeah. And the Alibaba stories, Arabian Nights, and that was the inspirations. And watching cartoons where you had like these different effects showing like this smoke coming and luring people. Oh, yes. There's a tasty food here.
Yeah.
So
back to Nimrod and Abraham, because I keep pulling you in every direction.
Yes.
You're such an interesting person with so many things to share.
Thank you. So I grew up as a Nimrod, and another very important thing about the name Nimrod, when you verb it into the Hebrew language, it's rebel. It's to rebel.
Yes.
And he was so-called brave, a good hunter, a good marketeer, very ego-driven, wanting to be very favored by gods. And this is where I'm gonna say things with some kind of, I would say, cautiousness, because it's an interpretation coming from reading the exterior books. But basically, Nimrod thought that the sky gods, the extraterrestrials, the Nephilim, are the creator. And he worshipped them. He basically worshipped many idols. And when you try to understand who were the idols that he worshipped back then, and trying to understand what was his argument with this dude called Avraham, then Avraham telling him, no, they're not the true creator. Nimrod, they're like these maybe ETs, fallen angels, you can give them any kind of name, but they're not the creator. We all come from the same creator, and they know that, and you worship them instead of worshiping the creator, the one. And Nimrod got angry with this Avraham dude, which was very kind, which was very, openly having people in his house and trying to promote kindness and good, and trying to promote a monotheistic belief, where Nimrod thought that, no, it's not a single God, it's many gods. And I even heard that they had a fight where Avram broke the statues.
The idols.
The idols that Nimrod had in his tent, castle, whatever. And Nimrod got so angry, he decided to throw Avram to the fire. It would burn him. And the story is that Avram wasn't burned by Nimrod because there was an intervention. And the intervention basically was another angel, or ET, telling Nimrod, hey, yo, this Avram dude is right. You're wrong. And Nimrod couldn't say to the ET, I guess, or to the angel, or to the Nephilim, or to the Anunnaki. I don't know even how you
well, because that was who he worshipped. He would have worshipped that angel, that being.
Yeah. And this angel told him, sorry, man, I had to bring it to you, but this Avram guy is right. We all come from the same source, and you should be thankful for him to telling you the truth. And that's where Abram was given the fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and that's the Hey, which is the representation of the one. And he turned from Avram to Avraham, from Avram to Abraham, in the Hebrew. And there are rumors that say that towards the end of days, Nimrod and Abraham became friends. And in many ways, I feel almost that I'm replicating these stories based on, my very small, humble life. Like, I was a marketeer. I'm a good marketeer. I got awards, and I worked for brands that started as small companies and became big corporates, and I come up with the strategies, and I know how to tell an accurate story. Maybe not in this interview. I apologize for this.
Oh no, we have so much to talk about, and we will have you back to explore all of these different topics we're raising, because the role of, created in the image of God, the role of religion in society, that is a vast topic with so many facets and so many elements. And so we will have to wrap it up here for tonight's show. But please do continue, and then I'll find a point to.
So fast forward to April 21, taking most of the things that I managed to realize about life, the universe, creation, and myself, and deciding, it was the tough days of COVID, and deciding that it's time for me to promote unity and peace and love and the Creator on this planet. Because it feels like end of days here.
Yes.
And we're rushing into this insane warish kind of situation where if I'm betting my life on this. If you ask 98% of the people on this planet if they want to have a war now, and is it religious wars are justified, or wars over resources is justified, I have a very good feeling they would tell you no.
Of course. Even in we were at a conversation yesterday where I don't ever talk politics, but somebody was mentioning that this one particular political party in America was against the war in Ukraine. And I said, isn't that interesting? Because in people's conception, that particular party was always the pro-war party. So I agree with you, and I'm not saying they were or weren't, but in people's perceptions of things. So I have
a feeling I know what you're talking about.
People do not want war. They do not. And it's always been that way to a degree, but now it is an intense. And we had a lengthy discussion with some wonderful diverse people and diverse views about how does one change one's own thoughts to become less warlike in our own selves, and to understand how do we put together a unit, a family, a civilization that does not lead to war. Because if nobody wants war, why do we always have it?
Because I think the world right now is missing a very important role. It's missing leaders. There's only rulers right now that are ruling the world. There are no leaders. You spoke about the Dalai Lama. He could have led the world instead of getting caught 2 years ago.
Well, it's funny because, yes, Jesus, for example, the accusation that brought him to his death was that he was an insurrectionist, right? He has made himself king. But his teachings were actually teachings of peace. But even the people around him were all accusing him of wanting to be a ruler. When he, again, at the Super Bowl yesterday, they had this big commercial about everybody washing each other's feet, because that's what Jesus did. He washed his disciples' feet.
amazing. That's humbleness. That's, thinking outside of our ego. I mean,
Right.
one of the biggest problems, on this planet and with mankind is that we basically let the ego lead us, and we never grew up from our, I would say, place of idolizing matter instead of spirit. And that people don't understand that we come here for a very short period of time. It's almost a wink of an eye, because time is a man-made thing, and it's like a dream. And when we come here, we come here to be happy. And no one can convince me that, the richer I get, the happier I will get. But now, knowing everything that I know, you can convince me that if I hug a tree, I have a much higher chances on becoming, more relaxed and more happy than dealing, with my bank account. I don't know if you follow me.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely. And again, to quote Jesus, we could also, I'm sure, if I were more familiar with the Quran, quote that, or the Vedas from Hindu. But Jesus said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God.
Absolutely. And I think, we are now at the times where God reminds us that we need to enter his house now. We need to raise our consciousness, and the practical way to do it is to apply the energy that I mentioned, which is called love. And I would say the impossible is to apply unconditional love, is to work on an egoless society. And it's almost undoable. And I like giving examples. Like, for example, it always comes back to the blue pill, red pill kind of situation, where, for example, you go with your car and you drive, and there are a lot of traffic jams, and then you have like this cocky young driver cutting you and almost doing an accident. Now, and you pull off, and you have like a very unique moment where the guy you cut is super angry and is gonna be very menacing to you. And our immediate reaction, the fight or flight, basically the surviving mechanism, is let's be reactionist with him. And immediately you come up with this violent, miserable situation where your life can change. But if you only remembered when this thing happened, to take the ego, throw it aside, knowing this was not personal. It's not a personal thing. You happen to be now in an awkward situation, and one of the people that is, ready for the fight would say, no, I'm not fighting. Not only that I'm not fighting, I'm gonna go down, put my ego away, say sorry, ask him if he wants to hug, ask him if I can do something. You immediately create a magical moment. And this magical moment is a godly moment. And this is the time where we need to start applying different tools and different exercises to bring us into a more, I would say, collective understanding and us coming together. So that's, that's I would say that's the test. And it's so broken simply in a simple way on should I apply live now, or should I be my ego monkey and take my baseball bat?
Yes.
And I test it. Always magic.
Well,
Same with our kids. Same with
yep,
everything.
we'll put a pin in it right there, because I think that's a beautiful way to conclude tonight's episode. And we will look for a time to have you back, because there are so many more questions I have. I have about 5 of them right now that I want to ask, but I'm going to have to wait, and our audience is going to have to wait. But I want to thank you for your time. I know you have, it's middle of the afternoon over there. You've taken time out of your
5
busy
p.m.,
day.
7 minutes to 5 p.m. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So here in the US, we say it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and you're proving that to be correct, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
But in any case, thank you so much for joining us on the Creating the Image of God show. And we didn't really even get into God's gang, and I have a bunch of questions about that. So we'll look for the soonest possible time to have you back on the show and continue this fascinating discussion. When we come back from this short commercial break, we'll spend just a couple more minutes making sure that our guests get an appropriate reward for having had what I assume will be fascinating comments in the chat about this wonderful discussion.
Can I offer some rewards as well?
Yes, absolutely. Please.
We have a shop. You're more than welcome to go, but we have great t-shirts and notebooks and even baseball hats. So if you want to give your audience some God's Gang goodies,
we will be giving away some God's Gang swag for
Yes.
Our audience. So thank you so much for that generosity. And our sponsor will also, contribute to that by purchasing those items from your shop and giving them away. Okay. So when we return, we'll also announce next week's show and award those prizes. So don't go anywhere. We'll wrap up very quickly. But thank you once more, Nimrod Avraham, and we will have you back soon.
Thank you.
One of America's greatest literary treasures, Mark Twain, once said, "I apologize for such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." Get ready for a literary journey that's as rich and diverse as the flavors in a fine wine. Introducing 25 Servings of Soup, a literary tasting of established and rising talent. These stories aren't just enjoyable on the surface. Each one carries a special note, a subtle exploration of social issues, a celebration of diverse characters, and a spotlight on the challenges faced by those different from us. As you turn the pages, you'll find not just entertainment, but a profound invitation. An invitation to understand, respect, love, and empathize with others better. Dive into 25 Servings of Soup, literary journeys into life, meaning, and love. Because great stories are meant to be savored, shared, and remembered. Grab your copy today.
Well, welcome back to the conclusion of tonight's amazing episode. For the observant, I'm wearing a different sweater because I'm live now, not on that pre-recorded video, but I've been here engaging with some of the audience in the chat throughout. So the only thing that's left to do is tell about next week's show and quickly award some of you some gifts, some swag, some books. So next week, we will have Stephen Mashat on the show. He was actually recommended by tonight's guest, by Nimrod Avraham. And Stephen Mashat is an attorney, an accountant, a producer, and an author. He has produced notable figures like Leonard Cohen, Peter Gabriel, many others, also some more modern artists. I'm dating myself a little bit by mentioning some of my favorites. And he's written a number of books, and the one that we'll be talking about is a book called Unraveling the Bible. In tonight's chat, there was some interesting comments about the Nephilim and Nimrod's interpretation of early events in the Bible. With Stephen Mashat, we'll get into a little bit more of that as we discuss some of the topics in his book, Unraveling the Bible. A fascinating look at an alternative interpretation of biblical events. So we hope you'll tune in, same time, same place, 8 p.m. Central Time, Tuesday night, created in the image of God every Tuesday at this time and place. Also, press your likes, subscribe, share this event. We have a growing audience, and we're very excited about that. So there are a number of people who had great comments and I shared some of them as we were going along. We had the one about naming the two pillars, which I was well. Let's start with Kevin Randall, who called out Yip Harburg, who was the lyricist of the somewhere over the rainbow, and it was Harold Arlen who did the melody. But kudos to Kevin, who then also, I believe, later came out with the names of the two pillars, Boaz and Yachin, depending on how you pronounce it, from the Old Testament. So definitely a prize winner there. We had a number of great comments from Golden Rule, from Agape, and from The Word, from Fiscal Mistress, who called out the Nephilim, who are from those early books, those early chapters in the book of Genesis. The Word also wondering about that, and Agape. So interesting conversation about that. So any of you that I mentioned, please do. And also Crackers, who made a number of great comments, including how well crackers and soup go together. So send an email to info@soupllc.com. I'm putting it in the chat. And whether it's some swag from Nimrod's shop, whether it's a copy of 25 servings of soup, claim your free prize. And if you're in the US in particular, we can get that out to you. Depending on where you are in the world, it might be a little more difficult. We have a limited budget for our giveaways, and we can't eat that all up with international shipping. But do send an email to info@soupllc.com, and we'll get that right out to you. Let us know what you'd like. We will have Nimrod back. We will show more about God's Gang, but come in next week for Stephen Mashat. And thank you for your loyalty and participation. Do spread the word. Until next Tuesday,